He was unemployed. He didn't have money to pay his bills and stuff. He struggled day to day trying to find work. I never thought I'd have to worry about anything ever again. Never thought in a million years we'd be broke.
In 2001, David Lee Edwards, a convicted armed robber with a substance abuse problem, was so broke he had to borrow money from a friend just to pay his water bill. With the change, he got a pizza and 2 lottery tickets. Little did he know, one of those lottery tickets would change his life forever. Overnight, he was catapulted from a life bouncing in and out of prison to one of extreme luxury, racehorses, and fast cars. His story was a real rags-to-riches tale and proved that PowerBall can propel winners from poverty to excessive wealth in an instant. Americans spend over $70 billion on Powerball tickets every year, hoping to get as lucky as Edwards. But what's often overlooked is that 70% of those who find fortune through the lottery go broke within the first few years. And Edwards achieved this more spectacularly than most. Early life and struggles. Edwards was born in 1955 and grew up in Ashland, Kentucky in a low-income family. His early life was marked by tragedy. His 3-year-old sister died during open heart surgery the year he was born, and his eldest brother passed away after driving into shallow water at Greenbow Lake. His mother, racked with grief, struggled to cope with the losses and kept their baby clothes hanging in Edwards' closet. In his teens, he turned to marijuana and alcohol as a way to escape his troubles. At 16, he was caught committing a robbery and had his first run-in with the law. In another event, he got into a shootout with state police and had to be tear-gassed before anyone got hurt. They sent him to a reformatory school, one he'd bragged that Charles Manson had attended, but it didn't stick, and he dropped out before graduation. By age 18, he moved on from weed to harder drugs, and his pattern of substance abuse and theft escalated. Then, when he was 26 years old, he attempted an armed robbery of his local gas station for $360 and was sent to prison for 10 years. He was let out on parole a few times and was able to meet someone, marry, and father a daughter named Tiffany.
We'll buy Shauna a very nice engagement ring, which I really couldn't afford before. And
do you have a ring right now?
I have no jewelry.
No jewelry.
But he violated his parole as many times as he was released and was soon back in prison and divorced. In total, it took him 16 years to serve his 10-year sentence. Finally, behind bars, Edwards started to turn his life around. He got clean and began taking college courses, determined to make a better life for himself. And on his release in 1997, he started working in the building trade. Tragically, though, addiction continued to plague him, and he struggled to maintain a job. At one point, he even found himself homeless and living without his car. But it wasn't all bad. He met and fell in love with Shauna Maddox, a waitress at Fiesta Bravo, and the two got engaged. He also inherited his parents' old $30,000 house, and although he was still broke, at least they had a roof over their heads. Then in 2001, something extraordinary happened that would change everything. The lottery win. Edwards, who'd spent a third of his life in prison, was at this point in dire financial straits and struggling to make ends meet. Things had become so bad that they couldn't even pay their water bill, and their supply was shut off. Feeling embarrassed and desperate, Edwards turned to a friend for help. He borrowed some money to turn the water back on and decided to take Shauna out for pizza and a drink to forget their troubles. On their way to the bar, they stopped at Clark's Pump and Shop, and on a whim, they decided to try their luck and bought $7 worth of Powerball tickets.
I went up there and played that lottery. I was sincere when I asked God to help me because I was desperate. I felt just desperate in my soul, just desperate.
It had been 18 weeks without a winner, and the jackpot had ballooned to $280 million, the third highest on record at the time. That evening, Edwards and Shauna watched in disbelief as their numbers were called out, every single one. Along with 4 other winners that night, Edwards had just become a multi-millionaire. His share was $41 million, which amounted to $27 million after taxes. A hefty deduction, but still enough to set him up for life. Now, all lottery winners are given 2 choices: take the lump sum or accept yearly payouts for a specified amount of time. So, in Edwards' case, he was offered $27 million on the spot, or $2.9 million a year for 25 years. Given his history, yearly payments would be the safer bet, but every financial expert advises taking the lump sum. This is because investing the lump sum will almost always generate more cash than the yearly payments will achieve. In one of his last wise decisions, Edwards sought the advice of a financial advisor, James Gibbs. He devised a financial plan that, if followed, would generate $85,000 in interest per month for the rest of Edwards' life. He also protected a substantial portion of the fortune by investing $16 million of the profits in extremely safe bonds and annuities. With plans in place, Edwards seemed ready to accept his huge ceremonial check. In spite of his past, he seemed grounded and sensible, saying, "I didn't want to accept this money by saying I'm going to get mansions and I'm going to get cars, I'm going to get this and that." He also added, "I would like to accept it with humility. I want this money to last, for me, for my future wife, for my daughter, and for my future generations." With this attitude and such sound investments, what can go wrong? Edwards' lavish lifestyle.
He went and bought a Lamborghini Diablo, a Ferrari 360 Spider. He bought a Bentley, an Escalade, a Shelby Series 1, and a Dodge Viper. He bought himself a mansion. I was walking into a castle. Had a big, huge pool with a hot tub outside, and I mean, the ceilings, I don't know how big they were. They were just enormous.
Mere moments after accepting his winnings, Edwards reversed course. Too impatient to wait for the cash to hit his accounts, his first move was to negotiate a $200,000 bank loan so he and some friends could make the trip to Las Vegas to celebrate. Within just 5 days, he squandered the full $200,000 and called his new lawyer to wire him more cash. Once the actual winnings arrived, he moved from a $30,000 rundown, unwatered Kentucky home to a 6,000 square foot, $1.6 million mansion in a gated neighborhood in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, complete with tennis courts and a golf course. Then he spent another $1 million buying a fleet of expensive vehicles, including a $200,000 Lamborghini Diablo and a $90,000 Dodge Viper.
R-Series Bentley Rolls-Royce convertible.
And Shauna, you told me you were going to get a car too. Tell me about that.
Well, it's between three, actually.
Okay.
Dodge Viper, a Lamborghini, or a Ferrari. I really haven't decided which one yet.
In fact, he bought so many vehicles that his neighbors objected to the gated community's board of directors. What was their gripe? He accumulated so many that their affluent neighborhood had begun to resemble a car lot. Next, he bought a $600,000 Palm Springs property nearby, an $80,000 gold watch, a $160,000 ring, a $30,000 plasma TV, 3 racing horses, and a collection of 200 imitation medieval swords and armor. Then, to ensure he never had to travel between his estates in California and Florida like a chump on a commercial aircraft, he bought a private Learjet for $1.9 million and hired his own personal pilot. He also attempted some business investments with the best of intentions, but without Gibbs' input. These included 3 racehorses, which he got for a bargain due to 9/11 reducing overseas buying competition, a limo business, and a $4.5 million fiber optics installation business. Within 3 months, Edwards had blown through $3 million. By the end of the first year, he'd squandered $12 million, getting close to half of his fortune. Tiffany. The only pledge he stuck to was regarding his family. His daughter Tiffany, who was 11 by this point, had been living with her mother while Edwards bounced in and out of prison, and he missed her. When he found out he'd won, she was his first phone call. "Are you sitting down?" he asked. "Daddy's won the lottery, baby. I'm sending some people to come get you." The young girl freaked out and went running through the house, yelling and screaming. When she arrived to meet him at the hotel, the room was full of gifts, including a teardrop diamond ring. Unfortunately, there was a dark side to Edward's speed in reuniting with his daughter. As Tiffany would later explain, "The reason my dad sent people to get me was because of the security risk. He was known around here by people who knew I was his only daughter. He was worried they would kidnap me for money." Quickly, he paid off his $8,300 in delinquent child support and sent his ex-wife $500,000 for full custody of Tiffany. Her room in his mansion was decorated with angels and included a pink princess canopy bed, computer, and flat-screen TV, and he hired nannies, maids, and a butler to look after her and one of Shauna's children. Once a month, or whenever she felt like it, she'd fly home on the private jet to visit her mother. For her 13th birthday, he rented out the presidential suite at the Ashland Plaza Hotel for a slumber party, and he spoiled her with trips on yachts and to Cinderella's castle in Disneyland. Of course, not all his purchases were smart. He wasted $35,000 on a Hummer golf cart, which she was too young to drive, and enrolled her in a $16,000 a year private school, which she hated. Substance abuse. Regrettably, Edwards' excesses did not stop at cars, planes, diamonds, houses, and private jets. He and Shauna, now his wife, still struggled with addiction, and the cash only made it easier to fall into old habits. Edwards became, once again, absent from Tiffany's life, leaving her care to the nannies, and together, he and Shauna spent $200,000 each a month on illegal substances. Prescription pills and hard drugs were their drug of choice, and Edwards was extremely generous with both Shauna and his friends. Her OxyContin use got so bad that Edwards paid $80,000 for her to spend 60 days at Passages Malibu, an upmarket rehab clinic. The friends were not so lucky. Many of them died of overdoses, and Edwards paid for each of their funerals. Tragically, Shauna's rehab didn't stick, and their relationship became more volatile. Tiffany would later accuse her of stealing Rolexes and cars from Edwards, saying Shauna just started acting crazy. It was drugs, that's all. People keep telling my dad he should get rid of her, but he never could. He told me near the end that his one regret was not getting rid of Shauna and looking after himself, but they were hooked on each other, and then they were just hooked on drugs. In 2004, Shauna stabbed Edwards during a drug-fueled rage with a crack pipe, and the Palm Beach police were called to their estate. The following year, the police were called again, and this time, they found large stashes of cocaine, heroin, prescription drugs, crack, and used syringes in the couple's bedroom. Edwards and Shauna both acquired hepatitis from using dirty needles. The downfall to absolute zero.
Anything his heart desired, everything that he always wanted, he had. I was his princess. I was his only child. He gave me everything that I wanted.
A Kentucky man who won part of the $280 million lottery jackpot has died. He received a lump sum of $27 million after taxes.
By 2006, the money was gone, but worse than that, Edwards was in debt. His racehorses, one of which he hoped to name PowerBall, all turned out to be losers, and his many investments failed because of his lack of business sense and poor judgment. This left him with rising debt, and he was sued by both his creditors and former business partners. His financial advisor, Gibbs, was dumbfounded and told reporters if he followed my investment advice, he'd be pulling in about $85,000 a month for the rest of his life. Instead, he sold the lot. Everything he'd bought was sold, stolen, or repossessed, but he still owed Bank of America $170,000 for his credit card purchases and the state of Florida $50,000 in property taxes. The bank foreclosed on their Florida home, and Edwards and Shauna were forced to relocate to the rented warehouse that had been used to store his fleet of cars. Tiffany and her stepbrother were taken in for foster care. In the beginning, it was good, she said. I had a dad. That's all I'd wanted. In the end, I was devastated because I'd lost my dad, and I knew it. In the midst of accusations of adultery and abuse, Edwards and Shauna finally broke up, and he spiraled into misery and drug addiction. Conditions in the storage unit rapidly deteriorated until he was discovered there, living in his own feces, surrounded by rotting food, crack pipes, and syringes. His next step was rehab, and once clean, his ex-wife and her husband arrived to take him back to Kentucky. There he survived on disability payments and food stamps in a trailer park, a far cry from his previous opulent lifestyle of mansions and fast cars. But more than his wealth, he missed his friends and family who were gone or dead, and Shauna, who had quickly remarried. Despite being off the drugs, his liver was shot, his health started to deteriorate, and in 2012, he was diagnosed with liver disease. Then, in 2013, just 12 years after his historic win, he passed away in hospice, alone, and he was cremated as there was no money to bury him. He left Tiffany with nothing, not even a life insurance policy. She'd later reflect, would he still be alive if he hadn't won? Yes, I think he would.